A very warm welcome to or welcome back to my channel. I am a barrister who helps you understand law. So as you would have heard in my previous video, the judgment is entered and the judgment is final following the jury's unanimous verdict in this Depp Heard trial. You will all know that I've been fairly vocal about the differences and the disparity that I've described between the two judgments, that being in the UK trial, which, as I've said many times, was not against Amber Heard, although Elaine Brennerhaft would have you believe it is in her media interviews. The UK trial against Newsgroup Newspapers and Dan Wootton was very different, in my view, to the Virginia trial. But this has now resulted in a unanimous jury verdict, and the jury verdict has been entered as a judgment, and it is final. So I thought I would go through that judgment with you in this video, just to help you to enjoy that moment if you are in support of this decision, and we can read through this together, because it's been many weeks and months and even years in the making, with all of the evidence heard in court, all of the build up to the trial in itself, and preceding it, or in the middle of it really I should say, this case in the UK against Newsgroup Newspapers and Dan Wootton. I suspect that half of the reason for bringing the case in the UK was to use a successful judgment in that case as part of the evidence in the Virginia trial. Of course, that didn't work out, but conversely, it was ruled that the judgment could not be brought to the jury's attention in the Virginia trial because it would have no doubt prejudiced the jury in their thinking. However, on many occasions, as I've drawn your attention to, the lawyers for Amber Heard quite outspokenly drew attention to the UK trial, and indeed Amber Heard herself, in my view, directed the jury in what she said. Many people have said it wasn't directed at the jury and it was directed at the lawyer, but nonetheless, it was said by her while she was giving evidence. And remember, everything that she gives in evidence is supposed to be to the jury, so it is supposed to be the jury that take all of that information. And so ultimately they would have taken that and probably would have heard her say, go research this online. So anyway, any arguments that they did research this online cannot go in their favour, because they would have found this UK judgment if that's being the case. However, as I said, judgment is entered, judgment is final. So I thought I'd take a few moments to go through that with you so that you can look at this judgment, we can look at this together, and you can enjoy this moment of looking at this final judgment. So turning to this judgment now, you can see the outline of the judgment order at the top here. This matter came to be heard before a jury in this court beginning on the 11th of April 2022 and continuing for several weeks, with the jury deliberating from May the 27th to May the 31st and returning a verdict on June the 1st. A date which I remember well because I was on a live stream with Legal Bites at the time the jury returned their verdict, and we discussed it live. I'm sure you're all familiar with Legal Bites by now, but if you're not, head over there and subscribe straight away. I have huge thanks to Elita on Legal Bites for bringing me an international audience, and I thank you all for joining me if you are international. And of course, I appreciate all of my subscribers wherever you are based in the world. Before the jury, there were 3 counts of defamation brought by the plaintiff, Johnny Depp, and 1 count of defamation brought by the defendant and counterclaim plaintiff Amber Heard. Now, interesting to note that I will just jump ahead just a little bit in here. Now, whilst this jury verdict was unanimous in its making, and for the vast majority of it obviously in Johnny Depp's favour, there was one bit of it that went in Amber Heard's favour, and many people actually believe that this to be just to get one of the jurors over the line, or maybe 1 or 2 of the jurors over the line that may have felt that they had some sympathy for Amber and wanted to support her, and without a unanimous verdict obviously the trial would have collapsed. But perhaps that was the case, perhaps it wasn't, perhaps it was just that ultimately, unanimously, the jury agreed that this would be right. So it would be wrong to say anything other than the jury unanimously agreed that part of this at least should go in Amber's favour. And therefore, interestingly enough, I draw attention to Exhibit A to this judgment straight away before going through the rest of the judgment, and that is that plaintiff, i.e. Johnny Depp, and counterclaim defendant objections to the final order. In short, without reading all of this to you, what this means is that Johnny Depp and his lawyers did file objections to the final order, of course on the basis that part of the counterclaim was successful. And in doing so, all of the oral and written arguments were put in support, motions for summary judgments, motions to strike, and so on. All of the reasons stated in the written arguments, motions, jury instructions, and so on also. And interestingly, the court's failure to exclude some inadmissible hearsay statements. Now, this is going to be something that we will look in more detail later. But ultimately culminating in the jury's finding of defamation, which Johnny Depp, as to the statement made by Adam Waldman, as being contrary to the law and unsupported by the facts. In other words, the objection is against the jury's award in and of itself for $2 million in favour of Amber Heard against Johnny Depp in connection with the jury's finding of defamation being excessive and not supported by the facts, and all other objections by Mr. Depp stated in oral and written arguments in the record of this matter. So there were objections by Johnny Depp's lawyers to this final order, but of course only in that direction. But ultimately those objections were not accepted, and the judgment has been entered as per the jury verdict. So let's take a look at that. So we can read down here, at the conclusion of the trial and deliberations, the jury returned a verdict in favour of Mr. Depp on all 3 remaining defamation counts and awarded Mr. Depp $10 million in compensatory damages. Compensatory meaning some kind of compensation for the damage that it has caused to this innocent person. And what I found to be very interesting in this case, $5 million in punitive damages. Now remember, punitive damages are designed to punish the person that has done something wrong. Now an interesting case in point is that in the United Kingdom we just have damages. We don't have a separate punitive damages which is specifically to punish the person for what they've done. We just have damages. So an amount of money which is to compensate the person for the wrong that has occurred. However, in this trial, of course, you'll now be familiar, if you weren't before, with punitive damages, that being to punish the person who's done something wrong. So in this case, as I say, there were punitive damages awarded in the sum of $5 million. Now, of course, the jury awarded this thinking that that is what they feel was right to punish Amber Heard for the wrongdoing and defamation in this case. However, of course, that was reduced by a statutory cap, which I'll come back to in a moment. And so in addition to that, there was a verdict in favour of Amber Heard on her defamation count and awarded her $2 million in compensatory damages. And accordingly, the judge rules that the jury verdict is hereby incorporated into this order by reference and made part of this order. And you can see further down here that that jury verdict is indeed incorporated as part of the order. That's what you can see here with the answers to the question yes, no. This is the actual jury form that was filled out by the jury in response to this case. Skipping back to the beginning once more. And it is therefore ordered that the jury verdict of $5 million in punitive damages in favour of Mr. Depp is hereby reduced to $350,000. Remember, that is the statutory cap for punitive damages in the Virginia Code. And it is further ordered that with respect to the claimant, judgment is hereby entered in favour of Mr. Depp against Mr. Heard in the amount of $10.35 million, with interest at the statutory rate of 6% from the date of this order. And it's further ordered in respect to the counterclaim in favour of Miss Heard $2 million, with interest again at the rate of 6% per annum as of the date of this order. And this order is final, entered on this being yesterday, the 24th of June 2022. And as I said, you can see here the special verdict form, which was the form filled out by the jury. So this is incorporated as part of the order. So very often what happens is if there is an order by a jury, it can be incorporated into a judgment such as this. If there were a consent between the parties, in very often, and this applies in England and Wales as well, then that can also form part of a judgment. It's just that it would be ordered judgment by consent. But in this case, of course, there is the jury form. So this was what the jury were presented with. And this shows here, this special verdict form includes each of the statements which John C. Depp II bases his claim of defamation against Amber Heard. It instructed the jury to answer the questions in accordance with the court's instructions and goes through each and every question that they had to answer yes or no to. And so here you can see all of these questions answered yes. All of these questions also answered yes. And so this is incorporated as part of the judgment. So I thought you'd find this interesting to take a look at this judgment in light of the fact that this date has now passed and now the clock starts ticking as to whether Amber Heard is going to file any appeal. Now, lots of people have raised questions about, can she afford to appeal? Well, there is a prospect, a potential, if you will, that lawyers can act on a contingency or even just waiving their fees, and we won't know that. There are arguments and discussion as to whether her insurance has been paying fees and whether that would include appeals, all of which I will come back to in a later video. But in the meantime, I thought you might find that interesting to have a quick overview of the judgment itself. And given the length of this case, I thought finally, before I let you go from this video, I would contrast this quite starkly with the conclusion and summary of the UK trial, which, remember, was not against Amber Heard for all the reasons I've said in previous videos. But in that case, it was summed up in just a few words as follows. Conclusion and summary: it follows that this claim is dismissed. So I personally draw a very stark contrast between this and the Virginia jury unanimous verdict, which in the sum of $10.35 million in favor of Johnny Depp, including what the jury originally came to as punitive damages. Remember, punitive being punishing a party for their wrongdoing, in the sum of $5 million. Now, albeit this was reduced to $350,000 in accordance with the state's code, this is what the jury felt that was deserving for the defamatory statement, quite apart from the summary of the case in the UK, where the judge said it follows that this claim is dismissed. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope this has piqued your interest in law. It's certainly one of the predominant reasons that I've started this channel in the first place. I started it during the pandemic to help people to understand law, because so many people need some access to understand law, and law, very broadly speaking, is universal. Certainly the rule of law is a universal concept. It may be applied differently in different jurisdictions and even different states within that jurisdiction. But I hope that I have provided some kind of guidance and assistance to understand the law internationally as well as nationally, depending where you are. So I sincerely thank you for watching. I hope you will like this video and subscribe if you are not already. Please do hit the bell icon, because that will help you get notifications. You can support this channel and help me to keep doing more videos when new news stories arise by joining as a channel member, and I will gladly appreciate that. But in the meantime, I hope you found that interesting, and I thank you very much for watching.